Marvel's Spider-Man 2 really nails the aesthetic of being Spider-Man. Which is good, because I think this mask is for ages 5 to 8. Now all that embarrassing shit's out of the way, let's actually talk about the game. And, well, Spidey 2 doesn't really need that big of an introduction. I mean, everyone knows it's the sequel to Spider-Man 1, which is the one now, and Marvel's Spider-Man Miles Morales, which are both critically acclaimed games in their own right, and they cast an absolutely colossal shadow for a new title to escape if it wants to find its moment in the sun. So, with all these massive expectations attached to the release, I'm suffering from second-hand level anxiety for the people that built this game. I mean, can Insomniac even remotely come close to delivering what people expect? Well, good news on that front, because it's pretty dang good. So firstly, the game could have easily been called Spider-Man, but obviously I'm no marketing expert because that name clearly does suck. So the wider world of crime fighting and bad guy bopping has been properly expanded to account for both of our spandex-wearing web slingers, which are Peter Parker and Miles Morales. Every key facet of the game is built around a shared world, so while roaming the streets of New York, simply pull up your friendly Spider-Man app and, you know what, a dedicated button can be used to swap between your particular Spidey flavor. It's a bit like the multiple protagonist system in GTA 5, but it is worth noting that this particular swapsies feature does not extend to narrative moments, but in playing through the story, you'll come to understand why. So, out in the open world, you may be pleasantly surprised to see that the other Spidey might drop in to lend a hand when you're beating up bad guys, and this leads to duo takedowns and other sick visual fun. And then when the dust settles, you can even interact with your other Spidey bro for a post-bust celebration with awkward high fives and hugs all around.
But the next post-fight piece is on me.
Now, don't worry, I'm not going to spoil any storyline here. This is something that absolutely should be experienced firsthand, and you can take comfort in the fact that the game has been very carefully marketed to ensure that the lion's share of incredible story moments will be experienced with controller in hand, not via the third pre-order trailer or deluxe edition. Too many trailers for games. Now, let's start with the symbiote elephant in the room. The implied storytelling that takes place around Pete's sudden change in attitude is really, really cool. There is an immediate concern that comes from his now gruff tone of voice and newfound viciousness in combat, but other more subtle hints also emerge. Honestly, the whole experience feels really alien when your usually chipper hero is far more curt and dour. His random gameplay banter shifts from jovial quips and jokes to short exclamations of frustration and just genuinely explaining how pissed off he is.
I've got no patience for this today.
It's actually jarringly unnerving, but in a fantastic kind of way. I even noticed that the gleeful occasion where Miles would hang around for a high five after a crime bust seemingly no longer happened while my mate was being grumpy, which robbed me of bro hugs. I mean, acting like a prick sucks, but leaving a spider bro hanging, just felt like a hurtful line being crossed. Now, this harsh, tragic tale befalls our heroes in different ways, revealing that the cornerstone of the whole tale is one of loss. I mean, each of our pair has suffered greatly and need to banish their demons, some inner, some outer, and their separate methods to do so really speak volumes to personal strengths and strategy. So it puts forth a thought on personal reflection and just how much baggage we should shoulder on our journey. And if you don't care about any of that crap, you can still get by with explosions and punching the bad guys until the good guys win. Oh yeah! Each of your Spider guys has a bevy of unique abilities, costumes to unlock, and progression paths to explore, with a few key shared options such as personal stats, gadgets, and even a tree of shared Spidey skills to keep things balanced, like all things should be. Unlike Spider-Man 1, which actually alienated me with just the sheer volume of crap there was to do, of which we know not all of it was great. Seriously, it felt like watery gravy over good meat.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
The good news is that every side activity in this particular game has been carefully curated and measured to make sure that it's fun and doesn't overstay its welcome. This is something that was obviously intensely improved in the Miles title, so clearly it got circled on the whiteboard for the sequel. It means that when you're jumping off the main narrative path to partake in bee-drone shooting or treasure hunting or whatever else, they feel like palate cleansers between courses of a much larger narrative meal. And this also extends to the myriad of side plots within the game, with each telling a sharp micro tale that really celebrates its supporting cast, both returning and new, no spoilers. It helps that both the odd jobs and the story for this game take place in a city setting that absolutely blows me away. Honestly, the landscape on offer in Spider-Man 2 is beyond robust. It is dripping with detail, and you will find life in every crevice, cavity, and dark alleyway. It's easy to forget what you're doing and just sort of explore the world and just treat it like your own personal playground, like dropping into a basketball court just to be a menace. The landmass has actually been expanded from the core island of Manhattan, which now allows you to swing through the suburbs, which offers a wicked backdrop for missions beyond the usual city block, secret lab, or sewer level. Yep. It also means that there's now a giant body of water that needs to be contended with when you're traveling between these places. And while bridges do exist, you are a man spider, and you can do a great deal better than schlepping across one. I mean, you can probably take to the air with one of the game's most outstanding additions, the web wings. The feeling of momentum you gain from ascending and diving, it feels so fluid and natural that it's almost enough to make you consider trying wingsuiting in real life before you remember you're in your late 30s and you review video games. The world's also carefully designed to lean into these fun flippy flaps by adding rising air vents atop buildings and these wicked wind tunnels. They basically serve as windy highways throughout the environment, and they're like these long laneways of air that they just sort of look like a stiff breeze when you're navigating the world, but they function like a tunnel of movement. If you drift into one, the game will start to gently guide you along its zephyr at a breakneck speed, and this helps you move from one place to another. Now, that is to say that web swinging has been outclassed by gliding, because the tight control and speed offered by slanging the sticky white stuff still has tons of utility. So what ends up happening is this sort of gorgeous ballet of thwip and flap and dive with, point boosts and tricks, interspersing your actions to really look like a stylish way to get around. Now, obviously, when you're not swinging or gliding, you'll likely be bashing bad guys in the face, so combat has also had its screws tightened. They've got new additions, like a dedicated parry option, which is quite cool because it does a lot to amend sort of the dodge spamming of previous games, and it turns into a really rewarding counter once you upgrade it to do cool stuff like disarm a goon's weapon. There has also been a standout change to gadgets, with the radial wheels from the previous game put in the bin where they always belonged. Instead, we now have a simple equipable menu where you can do a quickfire mechanic, which is shoulder button plus face button. So, gone are the days of having the wrong gadget equipped and perhaps misfiring a critical shot at the worst time. Instead, any misfire is purely due to your own dumb fingers doing the dumb thing at a dumb time. You dummy. Where the web slingers vary is in their specific combat skills. Neatly lifted from Marvel's Spider-Man Miles Morales, these are all huge special attacks, and they range from massive AoE blasts to like an onslaught of mechanical arms pummeling a group of baddies, and even a range of squishy symbiote options that pack a brutal punch. Your spider guys will lift these from their progression paths, and you can have up to 4 equipped at a time, which means that you do get a bit of a mix and match option to actually assess the battlefield and choose what you think will work best. With your arsenal up and ready to go, the game is then ready to reintroduce the concept of boss fights. Now, come on, we're all friends here, so we can all admit, in the past Spidey games, these were largely a cinematic affair. Once you strip away the stunning veneer of Insomniac's graphical stylings, most of those fights were just like a Dr. Robotnik boss fight where you dodge crap until you could bop them on the head 3 times. But in the sequel proper, we are introduced to the savior of this experience, health bars! Now, hear me out, I know, this is nothing new, but the inclusion of an actual health metric for the massive boss fights means that every gadget, goo, whip, and punch actually has a measurable effect. So instead of masquerading as a fight, the giant boss battles are now actual brawls. I mean, the cadence of the fight still feels absolutely enormous, but with a progress meter communicating how you're doing and what attacks and gadgets are actually doing work, you become immersed in this epic showdown. Personal defeats are no longer a case of, oh well, I didn't know how well I was doing anyway, and instead have migrated to, if I hadn't wasted my spider shock, I would have had him! Of course, stealth is also in the game, and it remains largely unchanged from the refinement it received in Miles' previous adventure. But the game changer here is the addition of the web line. Basically, it's a cooler version of Batman's signature line launcher gizmo from the Arkham series, sort of, creating that walkable line of web to traverse. But where the Spidey crafted version takes the trophy is how you can create new web lines off an existing web line, literally spinning a web of walkways above the oblivious goons below. It is endlessly thrilling, creating this convenient catwalk of paths above all of Craven's multicultural henchmen, and then just picking them off at your leisure. You end up making their ceiling space look like it's decorated with Christmas lights, only, with webs and struggling criminals.
Alright, where to next?
Now, it really should come as no surprise that the game is absurdly pretty to behold. I mean, the amount of polish and shine afforded to characters is exceptional, be they human or otherwise. The way the cast will emote and converse during cutscenes is seriously stunning, and their performance just captures you and refuses to let go. This is also backed up by a range of awesome visual options, with things like ray tracing appearing in literally every mode that you choose, with a special shout out to the hybrid variable refresh rate mode, which squeezes out a few more frames in the fidelity game mode, go 40 frames per second. The audio is also killer, with a really exceptional soundtrack that obviously gives a distinct personality to both of our spiders, but when they're both on screen, it sort of enters its own symbiosis, creating a great urban cinematic mix that absolutely slaps. Vocal performances are again top-notch, with even tertiary characters offering a commanding portrayal of well-known comic book dorks that have been refined into believable and at times tragic characters.
Sorry. We will do our best to find out what happened. But until then...
At this point in a review, I'd usually air out a gripe or two and lament some missed opportunity or diabolical decision that has me swearing like J. Jonah Jameson.
You degenerate! What's your profanity?
Right, I'm sorry.
Even the usual pitfalls of the settings screen have been avoided. Like, the game has shipped chock full of options to customize your experience, both from an accessibility standpoint and an approachability standpoint, which means that nobody feels alienated when they sit down to swing with the Spider-Man. I could almost consider the lack of a New Game Plus option on launch day to be something worth taking a mark off for, but I know full well it's coming in post-release, so if anything, it just gives me a refactory period to rest my Spidey senses and just wait for an excuse to play the game again. Insomniac Games has long worn its heart on its sleeve when it comes to the passion it has for the Spider-Man universe. All the way back on the PlayStation 4, they created a formula that worked, and this is the elevation of that formula. The whole game is deeply steeped in a rich attention to detail that can really only come from people who truly care about what they're making. And the result is an experience where you are actively sharing the joy and love they put into the game. Honestly, the only way that you would not enjoy this title is if you have some personal dislike of Spider-Man. But even then, I feel that you couldn't help but admire what has been presented. Marvel's Spider-Man 2 is a masterful example of passionate game creation, blending a white-knuckle comic book adventure with the beautiful pathos of being human. It is sensational, it is spectacular, it is Spider-Man 2. And now, if you'll excuse me, the city needs me.
Did I just make a friend?
You did.